At Johns Hopkins, we propel forward. Down familiar corridors, along unmarked paths, on Baltimore's busy streets, and on campuses and in clinics across the globe. From the sites of historic breakthroughs to the edges of human knowledge, we are fueling discovery, promoting health, inspiring scholarship, strengthening communities, and building on a proud legacy to help define the future and continue the journey together.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'd like to offer a special welcome to those watching us via our live stream. I'm Chuck Clarvett, a trustee of the Johns Hopkins University and a proud member of the Krieger School's class of 1978. Did you recognize the voice in that video? Anybody know it? Nobody, okay. It's John Aston, a 1952 graduate of Johns Hopkins who went on to a celebrated career on stage and in film. You might remember The Addams Family, before returning to his alma mater to head up the theater program and serve as Homeward Professor of the Arts. It's great to be here with you tonight and to see so many friends, alumni, parents, and fellow supporters of Johns Hopkins. Before we hear from President Daniels, I'd like to take a moment to recognize some of the Hopkins leadership and volunteer leaders who are with us. I know you've only just gotten seated, so no need to stand, but please give a wave from where you're sitting. Fred Bronstein, Dean of the Peabody Institute. Hold all your applause. There he is, Fred. Susan DeMuth, Assistant Vice President for Alumni Relations and Executive Director of the Johns Hopkins Alumni Association. Lynn Deering, Berman Institute of Bioethics Board. Bernie Ferrari, Dean of the Carey Business School. Trustee Emeritus Richard Frary and Irene Frary, Bloomberg School of Public Health and Health Advisory Board. Johns Hopkins University, Taylor Haenix. Bill Nelson, Marriott I. Knott, Director and Professor of Oncology and Director of the Sidney Kimmel Comprehensive Cancer Center. Trustee Emeritus and former Chair of the Board, Morris Offit. Johns Hopkins University Trustee Sarah O'Hagan. Johns Hopkins University Trustee Anika Penn. Ed Schlesinger, Benjamin T. Rome, Dean of the Whiting School of Engineering. Beverly Wendland, James B. Knapp, Dean of the Zanville Krieger School of Arts and Sciences. And Denny Wirtz, Vice Provost for Research. I'm happy to say I got through all those names, and I don't think I got any of them wrong. Last fall, we concluded Rising to the Challenge, the most successful fundraising campaign in Johns Hopkins history. I had the privilege of serving as co-chair of the campaign, which set records not just for the total amount raised, but for the number of gifts and number of donors who gave. I know we all wake up every morning and thank God for Mike Bloomberg. But our students, faculty, researchers, patients, and development officers wake up every day and thank God for you. Each and every gift, more than 878,000 in total, help propel the people of Johns Hopkins forward, sharing the benefits of their discoveries and breakthroughs with the world. More than 279,000 donors made gifts in support of Johns Hopkins. Your support was essential to the success of the campaign and remains critical for our continued success. On behalf of all who benefit from your generosity, and on behalf of my campaign co-chairs and fellow trustees, I thank you. I have had the great fortune to work closely with Ron Daniels since his arrival at Johns Hopkins University. His time at the helm of our great university has been transformational. From the collaborative, cross-disciplinary spirit of one university, which you'll see in action later this evening, to championing access for limited income and first-generation students, and the partnership he has built with neighborhoods across Baltimore. Ron's vision has helped Johns Hopkins to lead by example, reasserting the vital role a research university can and must play in tackling the great issues of our time, and pointing the way forward here at home and in an increasingly interconnected and complex world. Please join me in welcoming the 14th president of the Johns Hopkins University and my good friend, Ron Daniels.
Well, thank you, Chuck, for your very kind words, and ever for your friendship, for your leadership, for your unstinting and enthusiastic support for our great university. Good evening to you all. Really glad that you're here with us. I'm delighted to be able to be with you in a place that celebrates the people and the events that make New York the extraordinary city, the extraordinary metropolis that it is. Exactly 2 weeks ago, the Johns Hopkins class of 2019 crossed the stage at their commencement ceremonies in Baltimore to join the ranks with so many of you in this room, our wonderful, quite extraordinary alumni. Now, as is tradition, they were joined by an exceptional group of men and women who received Johns Hopkins' highest recognition, our honorary degree. And one of the recipients, indeed, of our honorary degree this year, Sid Lerner, is with us this evening. Dr. Lerner, if you could make yourself known. Sid, as many of you will know, was one of the original Mad Men, a legendary advertising executive and now chairman, and really the brainchild of the global Meatless Monday campaign, something that's been really important at Hopkins, and I think that's something that's been very important at raising consciousness of the reliance that we have on meat and on meat-based protein and the very significant effects that it has on our environment. And Sid, it was really nice to be able to honor you. We're looking forward to continuing the celebration with an event here in New York in the very near future. Now, this group of outstanding honorees ran the gamut from Sid Lerner to a pioneering geneticist, to the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, to the first woman refugee to serve as justice on the Supreme Court of Canada, Rosie Abella. Rosie's a friend of mine, so it was really nice to be able to honor her contributions to jurisprudence and human rights. Now, with Rosie, given she was a friend, I said, if you come to Baltimore and we're going to confer this degree on you, I hope you'll also take the opportunity to speak to our graduating class. And she agreed to speak to the Krieger Master's graduation that happened the day before the full commencement. Now, as graduation speakers do, Rosie urged our students to use the knowledge and wisdom that they had gained to do good in the world. That wasn't terribly surprising. It's a stock theme. But her words carried a special poignancy and imperative. Rosie is the daughter of Holocaust survivors, and she was conceived actually in a displaced persons camp in Germany just after the end of the Second World War. And she knew well what the world could become. She reminded our students that they were graduating on the cusp of a historic anniversary. Indeed, it is the anniversary that we mark today, D-Day. As you know, roughly 18 hours and about 75 years ago, more than 150,000 Allied troops began the attack on the beaches of Normandy, a sacrifice of epic proportions that not only tipped the scales of the war, but changed the arc of history. The achievement of D-Day and all that it represented gave rise to, as Justice Abella put it, a luminous moral consensus around core democratic values that led to the great alliances and unparalleled prosperity that defined, that has shaped, that has informed our post-war world. However, she worried, as many of us worry, that the consensus, once so strong, seemingly unbreakable, appears to be dissolving, as intolerance, inequality, and disinformation have rendered democracies across the world more fragile than they have been in 7 decades. So I share Justice Abella's sense of urgency when she asked our students rhetorically, why are we not daily invoking and embodying the values that landed along with those forces on those beaches 75 years ago? Now, I can't speak for all of us, but I was able to answer unequivocally on behalf of Johns Hopkins. We are. Indeed, at the core of our university lies a commitment to individual flourishing and to the advancement of the common good, a devotion to tolerance and freedom for people and for the ideas they pursue, and an unwavering belief in the idea that reason and faith should form the basis, the bedrock of a good and decent society and serve as guides for human behavior. And in remarkable ways, in just the past year alone, we have dedicated ourselves to realizing the principles enshrined in the history of this university and called to mind by this landmark anniversary. Among these is the belief, I believe a cornerstone of the American dream and grounded in the data, that colleges and universities have the power to transform lives, that a world-class education should be available to all meritorious students, irrespective of their family's financial means. This year, thanks to a great New Yorker who happens to be, of course, a Hopkins alum and someone that Chuck just mentioned a few moments ago, Mike Bloomberg, we received the largest philanthropic gift in the history of higher education, and it is a remarkable gift, $1.8 billion to endow undergraduate financial aid in perpetuity. It doesn't get old. With Mike's staggering gift, we now join the pantheon of great universities who are not only need blind, but now loan free. And because we did not want to make our students wait even a New York minute to feel the effects of this gift, we immediately let our students know, who are currently enrolled in the program, that henceforth all future federal loans would be replaced by outright grants so that we could share the benefit of Mike's quite extraordinary largesse immediately. And we will be thrilled to welcome all the students now able to attend Hopkins Loan Free into community that is committed to enhancing the public discourse and debate that is so necessary for democratic societies to survive and to flourish. Our SNF Agora Institute was built to do just that. Now, launched with the support of a $150 million gift this past year from the Stavros Niarchos Foundation and modeled after the ancient Athenian Agora, this institute aims to investigate the stresses imperiling democracy and to advance workable solutions for a lot of the things that we're facing now and distressed by in the 21st century. And the Institute, though very much in its infancy, is already starting to make an impact. In the past 6 months, the Institute has gathered 3 sitting governors from across the ideological spectrum to share insights on how they work with opposition-controlled legislatures. It has convened an international conference on the restoration of democracy with journalists, scholars, and politicians from both sides of the aisle. And it has hosted a dialogue on the impact of technology on democracy that itself was interrupted by student protest, a great example of our firm commitment to the centrality of free expression. But undergirding our concern for the future of democracy lies fundamentally an abiding concern for people. And at Hopkins, we're daily putting into practice our belief in the dignity of every person and the importance of pursuing truth in the service of health and well-being. Our researchers have devised a single blood test capable of early detection of more than 60 deadly cancers. They have exposed the racial disparities that affect the quality of patient care in our communities and delivered low-cost, low-tech healthcare to mothers and children across the developing world. They are daily improving the quality of life in Baltimore and indeed around the world. And indeed, we are carrying all these values into the future and, as you may have heard, directly into the heart of our nation's capital, thanks to the recent acquisition of the iconic museum building. This unique space on Pennsylvania Avenue will be a new home for all of our DC programs that will not only be a citadel dedicated to reason, facts, and debate, but also a platform that will ensure that the insights and discovery of Hopkins researchers and scholars from all of the university schools will shape the national and global dialogue for generations to come. 5 months after D-Day, President Franklin Roosevelt was already looking beyond the military successes just past. He was imagining the world that would be created after the war and the institutions that he knew were critical to building that world. Universities, he knew, must be among those institutions. In a letter dated November 1944, he wrote, quote, "New frontiers of the mind are before us, and if they are pioneered with the same vision, boldness, and drive with which we have waged this war, we can create a fuller and more fruitful life." Thank you. Thank you for being part of an institution that has, not only for the last 75 years, but for almost 150 years now, pioneered new frontiers of the mind in order to build a fuller, safer, more just future for all. We're thrilled that you're here, and so very grateful of all the ways in which you embody the values of Hopkins and the support that you provide to us, and really touched by your continuous engagement in your alma mater. And now, I'd like to turn the program over to part of that future, a Bloomberg scholar who studied public health, sociology, and Africana studies, and a member of the great Hopkins class of 2019, Maddie Uri. Maddie.
Hi, so as he said, I graduated 2 weeks ago. My name is Madeline Uri. Yeah, it's a different world. Thank you. But I just wanted to take a minute to talk about how community, particularly the Hopkins community, has shaped me. Even before I arrived, I love the brick pathways, I love all of the amazing research that we do, but the fundamental reason why I decided to go to Hopkins in the first place was the money that Mr. Bloomberg provided. So Hopkins financial aid was unmatched to anything that I had seen, and my financial circumstances made that the primary factor in where I ended up going. And beyond just financial aid, once I got to Hopkins, there were so many resources, both financial and just in the community of Hopkins, that really made it an amazing experience. I was able to go to Jordan the summer after my freshman year and learn Arabic. I was able to conduct my own research in Kenya, work on numerous projects with amazing people in Nebraska and in Chicago looking at health disparities. And that was all thanks to the guidance that I had from my professors, from my mentors, and even from my peers. So Hopkins, the community that we have, it doesn't just last during your undergrad. You take that with you everywhere you go. And I realized that even within 2 weeks after graduating, I've had people reach out to me who I took freshman courses with, or even professors that I haven't seen since freshman year, asking me, what are my next steps? Did I need any assistance? What are your passions? Have you figured it out yet? And I just feel like Hopkins is such a great community and something that you have to continue to invest in, and I see myself investing in for the long run because it's provided me with opportunities that I never expected to have. And one of the things that I really do appreciate is being able to find my passion for public health and health disparities. So through public health, sociology, and Africana studies, I was able to work on a project looking at traditional healers and witch doctors in Kenya, all on my own, thanks to also with the guidance of a lot of advisors. Definitely not all on my own. But they found a way to make that fit in my schedule. They found a way to make it work for me. And I got to talk to people from Uganda, Rwanda, witch doctors, people who said that they could cure AIDS with the power of prayer, some of their patients, and just learned that public health is so far-reaching, so vast, and impacts so many different people's lives in so many different ways. And racial health disparities and health disparities in general are something that I'm incredibly passionate about, and one of the reasons why I'm so excited to introduce Dr. Brawley. He works on cancer screening and trying to find a way to look at things from every angle, not just the patient-doctor relationship, but also the factors within a patient's life, the interactions that they've had in their past, their experience with things like cigarette smoking and other factors that can affect having cancer, can affect whether or not a screening process is successful. And all of those things he does with intention, and he's done that since he graduated from the University of Chicago with a degree in medicine, since he became a doctor. And through his numerous chiefships, directorships, awards, he's proven that everything he does is with intention, and he knows what communities he's trying to serve. He knows what types of structures are in the way of providing more equitable health institutions, and he's continued to work and serve and dedicate his life to solving those problems, to alleviating those disparities. And that's why it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Brawley.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it. Good afternoon or good evening. I'm a medical oncologist and epidemiologist. I'm a cancer doc. I'm trained in epidemiology. I look at what's happening in the population in terms of trends in cancer. I spend a great deal of time trying to figure out how to interpret data and looking at why there are differences and how we can improve medicine. Let me start out by, as we often do in medicine, presenting a case to you. Mr. Samuels, not his real name, was a 60-year-old white man who passed out while working. He was a contractor. He was taken to the University of Chicago Hospital in the fall of 1983. He was resuscitated in the emergency room and admitted to the internal medicine service. I, as a third-year medical student, was charged with taking care of him, along with some other doctors. In taking a history and physical, Mr. Samuels had had abdominal problems for more than 8 years. He knew he was sick. He had not sought health care. We ultimately diagnosed him as having metastatic colon cancer. And he lived for another 3 months, and then he died. And his wife and adult children invited me to come to his funeral. Hence, I learned a few things. I learned about the honor and privilege of being a doctor and a healthcare provider. I also learned a little bit about health disparities, how we in medicine can do better. In terms of health disparities, one of the reasons why I came to Emory is so that I could work with some marvelous people in the School of Public Health and the School of Medicine to help to define what health disparities are and how we can better serve the people of the United States and indeed people of the world and do better in terms of taking care of medicine. Much of what I'm about is not finding a new drug or a new treatment, but making sure that people actually can enjoy the drugs and treatments that we already have. So a little bit in terms of looking at healthcare in the United States and are we leaving people behind? First, I want to note that in the year 2016, the United States spent $3.3 trillion on healthcare. That's $3.3 trillion, not $3.3 billion. $3.3 trillion is a large amount of money. All right? These are the largest economies in the world. If American medicine were a country, it would be the 5th largest economy in the world. We spent more money on health care than was spent on everything in the United Kingdom, and we came close to the economy of Germany in 2016, $3.3 trillion. This slide actually illustrates life expectancy in a number of Western European countries. The line that you see going vertically to the right of the screen, that's the average life expectancy in Western Europe, in the United States, North America, Japan. The dots are cost, on the y-axis are cost per person. You see, the red dot on top, the United States spends $9,000 to $10,000 per man, woman, and child per year on health care. It's the most expensive country in the world in terms of health care. But we don't have the greatest life expectancy. We don't even get to the average among Western European countries. Warren Buffett is fond of saying, cost is what you pay, value is what you get. Ladies and gentlemen, I have shown you that we spend a lot on health care, but we do not get value. The United States healthcare system is incredibly inefficient. We focus so much on diagnosis and treatment and spend very little time focusing on prevention of care. It's estimated that 30 to 40% of all the money spent on healthcare in the United States is waste. We could do better. People are dying needlessly because we are not working in a very efficient system for healthcare. Let me give you some examples of disparities. These are cancer disparities. I'm a cancer doctor. The age-adjusted death rate for cancer in the state of Utah is, in the last year for which there's data, 2015, 125 people died for every 100,000 people in the population. The equivalent in Kentucky was 195. 195 versus 125. That's a disparity. Let's look at colorectal cancer, the disease Mr. Samuels died of in 1983. The American Cancer Society this year estimates 145,600 will be diagnosed, about 51,000 will die. There has been a 50% decrease in the age-adjusted mortality rate for colorectal cancer since 1980. That's a really good thing. That means your average 60-year-old man or woman today, the risk of dying of colorectal cancer is about half of what it was for the average 60-year-old man or woman in the United States in 1980. That's a really good thing. But let's talk about the disparities. This map shows the decline by state. In the upper northeast, the dark blue states, we have amazing declines. We have a 63% decrease in age-adjusted mortality from colorectal cancer in Massachusetts from 1980 to 2015. It's 13% in Mississippi. Health disparities is Massachusetts versus Mississippi when you're looking at colorectal cancer. Look at the purple there. We need to focus on prevention in the United States. We focus so much on diagnosis and treatment and then don't do that very well. We need to design communities to encourage a healthier lifestyle. We need to encourage a lifestyle where people walk. We need to encourage people not to smoke. We need to have an environment where it's difficult for people to actually smoke. It's amazing. We actually have good science to show that when it's hard for people to smoke, guess what? People don't smoke and people don't start smoking. We need to increase access to better food choices. You're going to hear more about that in a little bit. We need to increase access to high quality care. Now, one of the things that we did last year, my epidemiologic group, was try to quantify cancer health disparities in the United States. It's estimated that 607,000 Americans are going to die from cancer this year. We actually are able to estimate that 152,000 of those Americans would not die if all had adequate preventive, diagnostic, and therapeutic care. 1 in 4 deaths would not occur if we just logistically were able to get every American what every American ought to get. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in 2009, I went away for about 9 months as a reservist. I was the doc on the USS Macon Island during the surge in Iraq. I spent some time in the Pacific and Indian Ocean. The thought of Otis Brawley and 1,800 sailors and Marines on one ship is a thought in itself. Average age 22. On that ship, as in much of the military, we had this saying, "We are Americans, we leave no one behind." I came back to my hospital in Atlanta, and I walk around and I say, "We are Americans and we leave a lot of people behind." 1 in 4 cancer deaths is preventable if we simply got what we already know every human should get: prevention, diagnostic, and therapeutic to every American. By the way, the majority of those preventable deaths are like Mr. Samuels. Mr. Samuels did not have insurance, and he did not have the ability to go get the care that he knew that he needed to get for the 8 years that he had those symptoms. The majority of those people who are disparate are white Americans. Yes, there's a huge black-white disparity in the United States, but the majority of the people who suffer and die because of disparities in America are white. The majority are residents of the southern United States, those purple states I showed you in that slide. The majority are middle class and blue collar. They are the middle class who don't have access or the ability to utilize good health care. The issues of disparities are about race, but they're also about socioeconomics. They're also about region of the country. We can do better. I ask you to take a little personal responsibility about your own health. Everybody should try to walk 40 or do something aerobic for about 45 minutes 4 times a week. It can be walking, it can be running, it can be the elliptical. I've seen the president of the university at the gym a few times. Everybody should try to eat 5 to 9 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. We should all avoid smoking and other high-risk behaviors. We should pay attention to the healthcare debate, and we should care about other Americans. We should try to leave no one behind. Let's work together to make this a much more efficient system. We're spending so much money on healthcare. If we could just be a little bit more efficient, we could save a lot more lives. Now you've had a little idea of what I do as a Bloomberg Distinguished Professor, and what coming to Hopkins has allowed me to do is work with some amazing young people in the School of Public Health who are interested in studying these things, some amazing scientists in the School of Medicine who are also interested in developing treatments and getting these treatments to folks. And I thank you. Yep. Thank you. If I can call up to the stage Mohammed Madaris of the School of Arts and Sciences class of 2011. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Mohammed Madaris, and I wish I graduated 2 weeks ago. I was a 2011 public health studies major at the Homewood campus, and beyond studying the best major at Hopkins, my fondest memories were biking across the country with the Hopkins 4K for Cancer team, studying on the DC campus, and taking time off to work on the 2010 FIFA World Cup organizing committee in South Africa before I came back to the United States to spend my senior year at the Bloomberg School of Public Health, an incredible opportunity that undergraduate public health majors still have to this day. During my senior year, I was nominated by former Dean Bader for the Rhodes and Mitchell Scholarships, which ultimately sent me to Europe for my graduate studies. Today, I'm a TED resident at TED headquarters, so I'm especially interested in seeing these TED-style talks today, as I gave mine a few weeks ago on the TED stage. As a food entrepreneur, my TED Talk is influenced by my work as the founder of Abe's Eats, which is best known for creating the first interfaith meat that is both halal and kosher at the same time. We help food businesses attract a growing Muslim and Jewish consumer base as they save on inventory space and even food waste. I'm most proud of the fact that we make high-quality faith-based foods more nutritional and more accessible by being more inclusive. Speaking of access to high-quality nutrition, when I was introduced to the following professor's work, I had one question: is she hiring? As a food entrepreneur, I've had the luxury of working with some fun people, but I think it's the Hopkins in me that doesn't care much for the glitz and glamour of the food industry, but rather of the agricultural policies that impact our farmers, especially with the recent trade issues with China, and the decisions that are made around nutrition that can prevent or create acute or chronic health issues. Bloomberg Distinguished Professor Jessica Fanzo works on this and more. She is leading the university's efforts at the intersection of agriculture and ethics. Now, I'd like to believe that Dr. Fanzo and I have quite a bit in common, and I hope I don't sound like a secret admirer, but my first trip to sub-Saharan Africa to complete my public health work focused on HIV/AIDS. It just so happens Dr. Fanzo's first international work was also to rural sub-Saharan Africa, where her entry point was in HIV/AIDS. After a few years, she began to study public health nutrition, focusing on the interdependence of agriculture and food security. I too transitioned into studying nutrition at the intersection of agriculture and food security. In fact, my entire graduate program in Europe was designed by the very faculty Dr. Fanzo later served as the advisor to at the Earth Institute a few years later. Am I sounding like I really want this job or what? Sadly, this is where our paths separate. I caught the startup bug and I moved to San Francisco, and Dr. Fanzo stayed and continued to further focus on the linkages between agriculture and health to improve diversity and quality of maternal and children's diets in low-income communities, as well as the importance of regaining livelihoods in post-conflict regions through better nutritional governance. Dr. Fanzo has provided policy counsel to development projects at the United Nations, at the World Bank, the World Food Program, and she has been an incredible asset to Hopkins by creating new courses at the intersection of food security and ethics, classes I wish I could have taken myself. It is an honor to have Dr. Fanzo here tonight. I'm going to leave my resume here on the podium. Please help me in welcoming her on stage.
Great. Thank you so much, Mohammed, for such a wonderful introduction. You should be up here giving this talk, not me, and I have a feeling a lot of people are going to be asking you more about your entrepreneurial activities. So thank you all very much. It's a real pleasure to be here, be back in New York. I was at Columbia before coming to Johns Hopkins, which wooed me in for many reasons, but it's great to be back in New York City. So I'm going to talk a bit about this paradox of hunger and obesity that our world is experiencing. Just take a look at these figures. On the right is the Abubakar family from Darfur, Sudan. They're living in Chad in a refugee camp. That food in front of them, this food assistance from the World Food Program, cost them about $1 a week. On the right is the Revis family in North Carolina, middle-class family. Their food costs them about $300 a week. Look at the stark contrast here. The Abubakar family struggling every day to survive, feeling the extremes of hunger. The Revis family putting themselves at great risk for obesity, diabetes, heart disease, with the overly processed packaged foods, a lot of food, a lot of snacking. Why do we have this in the world, these massive extremes? Well, let me talk a little bit about the paradox and just show you some statistics. So take a look at these numbers. Maybe some of you have seen them. I see them every day, and I'm still in shock. We have almost 1 billion people who go to bed hungry every night. And that number is rising. It's been rising for the last 3 years. Why? Climate change and conflict. 150 million children are stunted. They're short, like me. But more importantly, they're cognitively impaired. Their brains do not develop. If you don't act on the first 2 years of life, that window shuts. They'll never reach their full potential. They'll never have the work capacity that all of you in this room have. And they'll never have that earning potential. Take a look at that last number. 2.1 billion people are overweight and obese. That's everywhere in the world. This number is exponentially rising. Rural, urban, poor, wealthy. This is incredible. This is a massive, massive burden. Right now, 1 in 3 people in the world are malnourished. And if we don't act in the next decade, 1 in 2 will be malnourished. Every country has a malnutrition problem. We see it in the United States, we see it in Kenya, we see it everywhere. So there's lots of reasons for this paradox of hunger and undernutrition and overnutrition. Again, conflict, climate change, population pressure, disparities. I'm going to talk about diets being at the crux of this issue. So I'm going to bring up 3 things. First, our diets are killing us. That which is meant to nourish is no longer nourishing. Diets are now the top risk factor of disease, disability, and death. Our diets, they're killing us. More than tobacco smoke, more than air pollution, which we've been hearing a lot about, it's our diets, these suboptimal diets. Our diets are also becoming less sustainable. The kind of demand for certain food products, particularly large ruminants like beef, is having an impact on the environment. It's taking its toll, not only on greenhouse gas emissions, which is warming the planet, but on land use, water use, deforestation, and biodiversity loss. Now, other foods have environmental impacts. It's not just beef, the cows, depending on where they're grown, how far that food has to move. But overall, as wealth increases around the world, we're seeing a demand for a different type of diet that is having a significant impact on the planet. Our diets are also not equitable. Depending on where you live, it can be very difficult to access a healthy diet. There's many food deserts in urban places, poor neighborhoods. Rural places are often being left behind. This is an image showing you Seattle, beautiful city. On the left is property value. Green is the wealthiest. Of course, it hugs the beautiful waterways of Seattle. On the right is a healthy eating index, a measure of healthy eating. These maps almost look identical. So the wealthier you are, the easier it is to access healthy foods and a healthy diet. So what do we do about this? First of all, we need governments to care. We need governments to govern their food system. Who owns the food system of a country? Food is produced, it's moved, it's manipulated, it hits markets, and you as a consumer makes a choice of what to purchase and buy. Where does government come in to help facilitate healthy diets? Not one country has a holistic food policy. We have agriculture strategies, we have dietary guidelines, but no country in the world has a food policy that's promoting healthy diets. We need governments to think about taxes on unhealthy foods, soda. Bloomberg was very famous for the tax policy he tried to implement in New York. Subsidies. We also need better agriculture aligning to diets. Right now, if you look to the right, this is what we're producing in the world. 75% of the land used for agriculture is growing 12 crops in the world. Now, mind you, we have thousands of different kinds of species of foods to be grown. 12 crops dominate 75% of the land. Maize, rice, wheat, potatoes, soy, sugar, oil. That is not aligned to what we should be eating around fruits and vegetables, as Dr. Brawley said. Healthy fats, nuts, legumes, seeds. We need to align what's being produced worldwide to the kinds of foods we should be eating. Consumers need to shift, right? We as consumers need to change our own behaviors. We can't leave it all to the farmers. So how do we do that? How do we realign ourselves and create a different kind of demand? Right now, we're consuming a lot of processed packaged foods, high in salt, sugar, and fat. Not enough of the healthy foods, whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. We need to change that demand, and a great place to start is in schools, particularly young kids. Their taste buds are changing and they're forming. So school meal programs can be incredibly important in shaping the future diet of the planet. We're really in a situation now, the food system is really off the rails. It's like a high-speed train. It's not broken. It's not like a broken car that you need to fix. It's a fast-moving train, and it's gone off the rails, so we need to get it back on track. So we're really at this breaking point in how we're going to feed 10 billion people by 2050. How are we going to do it? If we don't act, we are really risking ourselves catastrophic consequences, not only for ourselves, but for the planet. And if we let the planet get to a 2-degree warmed world, the Earth systems will take over, and we are no longer in control. We lose control of the way the Earth will shift. If we do act, we're really in a win-win situation. We'll address the paradox, the multiple burdens of malnutrition. We could potentially recover from the devastation that the planet has already faced and save the species as well as our food system that bears the diets that we need so badly. So the issue is vast. I'm sure I've completely depressed all of you. But there's lots that can be done, and you know, I have a very short talk, but individual action matters. It counts. So the first thing I would argue is you need to vote with your fork and vote with your dollars. What you decide to eat, who you vote for, how you spend your money on what kind of food shapes supply. It shapes the food industry. You as the consumer have power. If you think in that way, you can really shape the food system. Get to know your farmer. Get to know where your food comes from. All of these people are farmers. The farmer in the world, the average age is 60 years old. If the world is going urban and the farmer's getting older, who is going to grow our food? Get to know them. Learn their names. Go to the local markets. Support your local economies. Get to know those people that tend to be the most food insecure. They're the ones who are producing and manipulating your food. So get to know your farmer. The last thing I'll just say is, you know, this gets into a bit of the ethics world, but do we have the right to eat wrongly? Do you as an individual have the right anymore to say, you know what, who cares? I'm gonna eat a hamburger, I'm gonna eat French fries, I'm gonna smoke when I want. Can you just eat whatever you want? I would argue that what you eat does matter. It matters not only for yourself, for your own individual health, your own individual well-being, but it matters for your local community and the global community at large, and most importantly, the planet. Thank you. Sorry, I meant to introduce someone. We'd like to bring up Fritz Schrader, who's going to finish us off. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jess. So my name is Fritz Schrader. I have the wonderful privilege of serving as the Vice President for Development and Alumni Relations for Johns Hopkins University. I've been at the institution for a long time and love the place in words that I can't even put together. And part of why I love the place is what you saw tonight, which is this amazing blend of the heart of the faculty that really are the core of the institution, coupled with two graduates who sum up everything that Johns Hopkins exists to be, led by a president that has a vision at the end of 10 years, looking forward over the next 5 to 10 years that is truly compelling for the place. And so I hope that you all enjoy moments like these the way that I know I do. One of the things as I was listening to Otis and Jess that I am reminded of is one of the challenges in our work. And our work is about celebrating Johns Hopkins locally, nationally, and globally. And one of the challenges is how do you export what happens in Baltimore and Washington in a way that is accessible in New York and San Francisco and Tokyo and wherever? And part of it is you bring the magic of the place to you. You bring the magic of Jess and Otis. I have to tell you before I hit the actual script that someone wrote for me, I have to tell you one story as I'm watching Jess. So you got the point that both of them are Bloomberg Distinguished Professors. They sit on professorships that have allowed the president and the provost to bring truly stellar faculty from local institutions, from Emory to Hopkins. And periodically, we will give Mike Bloomberg the opportunity to have a conversation with the Bloomberg Distinguished Professors. It's sort of a moment of their understanding of how Mike thought about this gift with the president, but also a moment for him to really enjoy firsthand the way you did what they're doing and what they're doing in the world. And I remember the breakfast like it was yesterday when we first had about 10 of them sitting around the table and Jess Fanzo was sitting right next to Mike. And I'm about 4 people down the table, and you can imagine part of what I do is making sure those moments go beautifully. And he's happy, and they're happy, and everyone's happy. And I'm having one conversation on one side and listening out of the other ear, and I listen to Jess, who turns to Mike and says, as we're starting the breakfast, "Do you want to know where that food came from? Because I can tell you what you're about to eat." And of all the things that you want to have happen in that moment, that was not it. And, my heart stops. And, of course, Mike immediately says, "Yeah, I'd really actually like to hear it." And she did an amazing job, and he laughed, and he smiled. And I don't know that you stopped him from eating bacon, I will tell you that. But I do think there was an awareness moment that was very much like tonight. So I just wanted to celebrate what the institution truly is through these fabulous, fabulous faculty who are here with us tonight. One of my favorite things about these evenings and these times that we have together is the sense of family and community that happens when you put people from all kinds of different connections to the institution, alumni and parents and friends and trustees and volunteers in the same room, and you realize the chemistry and the friendship and the community that comes as a result of that. We are all here advancing the institution every single day, and we do that through our work as volunteers, through our advocacy for the institution, for your work, your support, and your connection to one another, and we want to thank you for that. So often we celebrate these in these amazing moments of a gift like the financial aid gift that Ron mentioned earlier, but more often it's really about the hundreds of thousands of individual donors who stepped forward long before that financial aid gift, who have made this institution truly what it is. It's the cliche of standing on the shoulders of generations of people who have walked before you and done what you are doing before you. As Chuck noted at the beginning of the program, the Rising to the Challenge campaign closed in the fall. It was a moment of celebration. In addition to the 280,000 donors who stepped forward in that, I wanted to leave you with another number this evening. More than 1,600 volunteers came together over the course of that effort, doing the things that I know you all have done, attending events, leading events, joining reunion committees, joining advisory boards. And so while we celebrate gifts, we celebrate support, we celebrate that so precious contribution of time as well. And I want to take a moment to thank everyone for the volunteer time that they spend around this institution. There are more than 6 decades of experience in this room alone, 6 decades of Hopkins history coming around the table and around the room to join us in this celebration tonight of Johns Hopkins. And before I turn things over to our Old Bay Brass in just a moment, I want to continue to invite you to participate in the life of your institution. And you do that by joining us in these evenings. You do that by participating online when we live stream events, when you can learn what's going on through the online participation. We do that through your advocacy, through your hosting of events, and through your volunteerism. And I simply want to encourage you and thank you for your role as ambassadors and friends of this great place. I am pleased to introduce a group of performers tonight, the Old Bay Brass, and I want to tell you that this group formed while they were all students at the Peabody Institute. You were introduced to Fred Bronstein, who is the head of the Peabody Institute earlier. Scott and Harry are now proud graduates. David will join their ranks shortly next May. I sat down as we were starting the program, and the first comment that my neighbor next to me made at the seat was, "Congratulations on bringing a brass trio to New York." So without any further introductions, please enjoy the music from the Old Bay Brass, and I hope you will join us for the reception outside immediately following. Thanks again for being here this evening.